Okay, welcome everyone. We're thrilled to have you here for the liver cancer webinar. It is never too early to act. I'm Ruel, alongside with Miss Luca.
Hello.
We are your moderators for today's webinar, and we are very excited to have you with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ruel. Hello, everybody. I'm Luca. And before we jump in, let's cover a few housekeeping rules to make today's session like as smooth as possible.
Yeah, first, we're recording this webinar, so don't you worry about missing a thing. You'll have the chance to revisit insights and moments anytime you like.
Yeah, and if you got any question, you can use the Q&A button to send them through, and our expert will be eager to tackle them during our Q&A session.
Yeah, today's lineup is stellar. So we've got experts from all corners of liver cancer research and advocacy ready to share their insights.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, like think about groundbreaking updates, deep dive into patient care, and cutting-edge research that's set to change the game.
Yeah. Plus a live Q&A with our speakers where your questions lead the conversation.
No, exactly. Whether you're here like for knowledge support or to help address liver cancer, you are in the right place.
So let's kick things off with energy and hope. Ready, Luca?
Of course, born ready. Welcome to the front line of liver cancer awareness.
So before we dive into our first talk, allow me to introduce an extraordinary individual.
Good morning, everybody. As the current chair of Digestive Cancers Europe, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar organized by DICE to raise awareness about the importance of liver cancer prevention and early diagnosis. Liver cancer is the fifth most frequent cancer and the third most common cancer-related cause of death worldwide. In Europe, 87,000 Europeans were diagnosed with liver cancer in 2020, and 78,000 died from it the same year. These numbers have been rapidly rising since and continue to do so still. Yet, despite the significant burden of liver cancer, awareness about this disease appears to be much lower than for other cancers. This has several devastating consequences, including stigmatization of individuals who suffer from liver cancer or are at risk of developing this disease, as well as the lack of necessary organized efforts to reduce the incidence and mortality rates associated with this disease. As a colorectal cancer survivor, I sympathize with the challenges of the disease, while I also acknowledge the additional hurdles liver cancer patients across Europe are facing. For colorectal cancer, there are established early detection programs available. In contrast, liver cancer appears to be a neglected, heavy burden. As a former member of the European Parliament, I understand the challenges of placing liver cancer high on the agenda of all European countries. Yet, this is a crucial goal we must all collaboratively work towards. Importantly, the most common form of liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma, HCC, which accounts for 90% of cases, is a highly preventable disease. Furthermore, when HCC is detected early, several treatment options are available to patients, which are associated with long-term survival. It is easy to identify patients who are at high risk of developing this disease, since up to 90% of liver cancer cases occur in patients with underlying cirrhosis, which is why all major clinical guidelines recommended biannual HCC surveillance in these patients. Despite this, most liver cancer patients are diagnosed at later stages and face a very poor prognosis. Better organized prevention efforts and earlier diagnosis of HCC are key to tackling the growing incidence of liver cancer and to improving patient outcomes. This year, DICE has taken an important step towards enabling this by scooping the country-by-country HCC prevention and diagnosis landscape. Together with last year's Liver Cancer Index, it will serve as the foundation of DICE's advocacy efforts in the liver cancer field. You will hear more about this project during today's event, as well as several other key topics that we need to consider when looking for ways to improve the status quo in the liver cancer field. Thank you for your attention and for being here with us. It is our hope at DICE that through events such as this, we will amplify the discussion towards real action and move towards a future where all patients at risk of liver cancer or suffering from the disease will receive the treatment and care they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Liv. That was a wonderful speech. I believe that our moderators are having internet issues, so I'm just going to jump in for a second, and I will invite Dr. Maria Reig to speak, who is the head of the Barcelona Clinic for Liver Cancer, and she is a wonderful expert in the field, and she wanted to tell us a bit about screening and early diagnosis with a focus both on hepatocellular carcinoma and cholangiocarcinoma.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and also thank you guys for considering me to be here. As was presented before, the liver cancer field is a field that we are working on for a very long time, but we still have many things to do, and I will talk about primary liver cancer, so it means HCC and cholangiocarcinoma. This is my conflict of interest. And before talking about the screening, I would like to put on the table the reason why we usually want to improve in screening, because the adherence to the different programs of screening is very, very low. Despite of all of the work that was done during decades, we still have some areas where the screening program could be the adherence low than 30%. So this is one of the key points for consider in the future to change the strategy or to improve the strategy for increasing the screening and the early diagnosis of HCC. As my talk is focused on screening and diagnosis, and I believe that is key to keep into consideration that the criteria for diagnosis are very well done. It is everybody knows how we can diagnose an HCC or a cholangiocarcinoma. We have guidelines for different topics, and I put only two just to summarize that we have guidelines for that, but we need to find the strategy to improve how we identify those patients at early stages, because as was mentioned by Liv in her presentation, we still diagnose the patients with primary liver cancer, HCC, and cholangio in late stages. So let's go to talk about what are the areas that we need to work more or in depth in comparison what we are doing now. Personally speaking, I believe that the key thing is when the risk is unclear. This is the case for cholangiocarcinoma, but also for some patients that are good candidates for screening for HCC. This slide tries to summarize the unknown areas that we need to work more. Basically, what are the patients with moderate risk, who could be patients with high risk in the future, but we need to identify as soon as possible. Generally speaking, everybody knows that patients with cirrhosis are patients at risk, but now we are seeing patients without cirrhosis, without cofactors that develop, generally speaking, more cholangiocarcinoma than HCC, but we also have some patients without cirrhosis but have cofactors. How we identify these cofactors, how we could work on to promote different strategies for these patients. Then we have patients with liver fibrosis, with or without cofactors, and the evolution from one stage to the other is also still unknown. So this is the area, the unclear area that we need to work on. And that's why I propose to consider not only patients with cirrhosis, also identify better or characterize better the patient who could be at risk of this tumor. Generally speaking, when we talk about liver cancer, we have some criteria such as alcohol, nowadays also the MAFLD with obesity, diabetes, but also the lifestyles. It may have an impact on the liver cancer field, more characterized in Asia, but not only in this area, also around the world. So the key thing is for doing screening in this population, we need to have a very large sample size. We need to invest a high amount of budget to consider that. And some voices say, but just for less than 5% of decrease in mortality, that makes sense? I believe that the answer is yes. We need to identify better the population to decrease the die for all the patients that we could have. And for these politicians or these persons that only see the numbers in terms of the population, we also need to think about the individual patient. Not all patients, regardless of the connection with us, is candidate for liver cancer screening. We need to characterize those who could benefit from the treatment. So those patients who are candidates for screening and also candidates for treatment. So this is the key point, that the key message that I want to share with you. This is a need for sure. We need to think and try to convince ourselves to find innovative approaches to manage this issue. So the question that I have to answer is, what can we do to improve this situation? And for that, I'm not believe in general recommendation. It's not feasible. The first thing, and I believe that we need to work more from a rational strategies, we need to identify where we have to apply the screening program. It's not the same a rural area, a city with this culture or other. We need to identify the ecosystem in each of the areas that we want to do the screening program, and also obviously diagnosis of ATC. The second point is to whom? Who are the patients candidate for screening? In this case, we usually think about patients who are associated to alcohol, but there is a stigma. They are not only alcohol the problem. There are other problems, as you can see in the slide, that maybe we don't have a direct connection with liver cancer, but could be related to that, and we still need to work on these research areas. So important to identify where to whom, but also how do we apply this proposal of modification. We could have different profile of a screening program, different strategies, but we need to identify which of them fit in our population, fit in our system. And it's also important to consider how we are connected between each other. And this is a linkage strategy that I see very interesting. It is from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. We have to remember liver cancer, generally speaking, is associated to liver disease. So there's a different levels, institutional levels, community levels, and also inside individual levels to identify how we work on that. And maybe this is the most provocative part of the talk. I believe that the key thing is the culture. We have to work on the culture that we are working on. Each community, each clinical sector have different approaches. Each of us have different cultures, different specialties, also have different paradigms. But for having an improvement, a change on that, we have to work with the administrative part. And the priority for one part could be different as the priorities for the clinical makers or the patient of the patient. So we have to work on the culture. For that, we could have different strategy, education, but also interactions to identify what are the points that are not working at this moment as well as we want for improving the programs of screening and obviously for the diagnosis. So this is also linked to the last part, that is who pays. It's not the same to have a screening program in a private area, that is, we're talking about a public health system from one country that is under development or another country that is very rich. So all these parts have to be connected, and the only way to identify that is work as an innovative project that will put all together, discussing how we could work to improve these kind of things. So to be more precise, I believe that all these parts have to be into consideration for expanding the access, integrating the new technology, and also enhance education. refine the connections or the different type of screening. I prefer not talk about if we have to use MRI, if you have to use ultrasound, but depends on where we are. We could have different options. For that, we have the guidelines. And also forcing the collaboration across the different sectors. That's why this part is a different level, but it's important to consider in the future. But as we are in the era of technology, it's impossible to talk about new ideas without thinking about the technology. I find very interesting this review. It's focused on healthcare and change and evolution from the 70s to now. Now, according to Europe, we are in the era of the Industry 5.0. Means that we need to be patient-centered, we need to be technology integrated, and also sustainability. That means that we need to identify where we are to apply that. But regardless of being in the Industry 5.0, we still need to have in some areas for some populations, face-to-face interactions. So that's not mean that if we apply, according to this review, the healthcare 1.0 is not feasible to combine with different things. The key message here is we need to combine the human intelligence with the artificial intelligence, work together to have more innovative approach according to the different population, to tailoring the screening programs and also to tailoring the strategies for diagnosis. With that, I would like to finish this presentation, say that we have to have multidisciplinary approach as we have in the VCLC. I have the privilege to lead this group, and it's essential not only clinicians, also radiologists, pathologists, patient associations, and all the policy makers for improving this area. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria Reg. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Our internet is a bit unstable here at the office, but we'll try to continue with our moderation. And if we fall off at some point, Lily will take over. Thank you, Lily, for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, indeed, the current state of screening and early diagnosis has improved, but there are still barriers, like in access, accuracy, that we must address for a broader impact on global health, right?
Yeah, no, totally well. And on that point, I think we can continue the conversation with our next speaker. That we are thrilled to introduce a distinguished guest in the field of oncology.
That's right. Joining us is Professor Dr. Jeroen de Kervel from the Digestive Oncology Unit at University of Leuven, Belgium. He treats GI cancers and is an associate professor at the University in Leuven.
Yeah, his research is particularly compelling, and he studied advanced techniques like single analysis and liquid biopsies.
And his affiliation to major organizations like ESMO, ASCO, plus his involvement in the ESMO Upper GI faculty. His insights are truly at the forefront of oncological innovation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's get right into it, right? And learn more from the professor himself. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay,
we
perfect.
can.
I'm sorry if there's a bit of background noise. I'm in the outpatient clinic on Thursday, always treating patients with liver cancer. So also on this day, which is very important. Thank you for inviting me. I will go over briefly on the treatment, in fact, of primary liver cancer. And I will mainly focus on hepatocellular carcinoma. As you know, it's the most frequent one, but we can also talk, if you wish, about cholangiocarcinoma treatment as well. And there are some similarities, but there also are some differences. And the title is Patient-Centric Liver Cancer Care, and this is really what it's all about. And so if we think about treatment for liver cancer, I think we need to put the patient centrally, not only because, of course, the way a patient can present him or herself with liver cancer can be very different. I mean, you can imagine a situation where somebody has run a marathon yesterday and today presents unfortunately with liver cancer, but also at the same time we see patients that are bedbound or come in a wheelchair, and so this is already a very extensive variability that we see there, and you have to take this into account. But also, well, the patient preferences in terms of extensiveness of treatment, invasiveness of treatment. We go from surveillance in situation that we don't do anything to really treat the cancer, but going for supportive care, all the way up to liver transplantation and very drastic treatments for liver cancer. And again, the patient preference, the patient opinion, expectations for life is really something that is I would say the most important when recommending a treatment for liver cancer. But of course, it's not the only thing. We have to deal with the reality, and the reality is also the liver. And as you know, hepatocellular carcinoma, for example, mostly occurs in the context of chronic liver disease, of liver insufficiency, of liver cirrhosis. And so one of the first questions we will ask ourselves when dealing with a new diagnosis of liver cancer is, what is the state of the liver? How much can it cope? Is it the liver that is nearly healthy, for example? Then we know this organ has a huge regeneration capacity. And for example, you can resect half of the liver without any problem and treat a cancer, cure a cancer in that way. But at the same time, we see situations where the liver is just on the edge of doing its job, but a small push in the wrong direction could really lead to decompensation, as we call it. So a liver that is not functioning any longer. So that is actually what we need to know, because if we then would resect, for example, a part of that liver, this could have dramatic consequences. So that's a second aspect that we take into account. And then, of course, in all of oncology, it is the extent of the disease that is really important. So do we have to deal with one small lesion, or is the lesion somewhat bigger? Are there multiple lesions? And you can imagine that in an organ like the liver, it can be really very valuable. You can have one big lesion, you can have 20 small lesions, all liver cancer. And again, it speaks for itself that the situation that the disease presents itself is really guiding, or is really something that we really have to take into account when recommending a certain treatment. But as you can see, these are the three main factors, I would say, when we would recommend a treatment for a patient with hepatocellular carcinoma. And it's not that these are three separate categories. No, the one has an influence on the other. So we really have to integrate all that information. And as physicians, I think it is our job to come to a patient and to really give the most information, the most accurate information possible on all the options, because I have to say that most often there are many options, or at least a few options that we can recommend and to an individual patient. And so with that information, again, we need to make a decision together with the patient. So it's not one direction, as maybe it was decades ago, and this is not the way it's done anymore. So we give all the information that we have, and then together we make a decision on how to move forward. And I'm just going to highlight a bit of the principles that we use in treating hepatocellular carcinoma and treating liver cancer. So you have more or less three big categories where we can offer treatment. And of course, again, it depends on the liver function. It depends on the functional status of the patient. But if there is one small or a few small lesions in a liver that can cope with a resection, for example, this is, of course, something that has our preference, and to then go for resection. Or if resection is not possible, there are also techniques of what we call ablation. So you can, with heat or with radio frequency, and you can destruct some kind of part of the liver where the tumor is in, and this way treat the lesions. But this is, of course, only possible when the liver function is good enough, and also when the lesions are small and limited. And so not for all people presenting with liver cancer. That is what what we call the early disease, early HCC, and we know we can curative treatment, we can give curative treatment to these patients, although we always, after that treatment, have to take into account the risk for recurrence. And this is quite high, specifically in patients with cirrhosis, which can develop new lesions. And so we need to do a surveillance after that with regular scans. And then you have this so-called intermediate stage, or this in-between stage, and it's a bit more complex, a bit more debate on what is actually the best treatment for those patients. But these are patients with somewhat more lesions that cannot be resected anymore because it's too extensive. And there, this is really the place to a certain extent of what we call embolization techniques. And this is a specific treatment that we do not use in many other GI cancers or other cancers, but it is a liver-directed treatment with chemotherapy that is injected to the artery that goes to these lesions, or even some kind of radiation that we call radioembolization, so some kind of substance that has radioactivity, and this way treat these lesions. It is also, for some patients, the place of liver transplantation. So this is also an option, and of course, this also treats the underlying liver disease to a major extent. And then at the right side, you can see the most extensive disease, what we call advanced HCC, and in that case, the disease has already spread outside the liver, or at least invades the blood vessels, the major blood vessels going into the liver. And this is, of course, a situation where a very liver-directed treatment like surgery or even embolization is not really useful any longer. And there we use the so-called systemic treatments. Nowadays, as you might know, this is mostly infusions with immunotherapy combinations that we use. So these patients come to our daycare and they get on a regular basis these infusions, which have as a mode of action an activation of the immune system to find these tumors and to recognize these tumors as non-self, and so and in that sense attack them and try to control the disease and sometimes even remove it, because I mean, from these immunotherapies we already know now since a few years that these can sometimes work really well in a proportion of patients, and we see some patients with really durable disease control even after years of treatment. And this is unfortunately today it's still a small proportion of the patients with liver cancer, but nevertheless these are successes that we did not see previously with systemic treatments for this disease. But as you can see, it is a really complex paradigm. I would say it's more complex than, for example, other GI cancers sometimes, because we have to take into account the function of the liver, because this disease can present itself so heterogeneously. So I would say, and this is my last message, and Dr. Reich also alluded to that, it's really a multidisciplinary disease, which means a lot of doctors are involved. One doctor should do the communication mostly with the patient, but behind that there's a whole team of specialists in each of these treatments, and they have to come together and decide which one is now the one that we should recommend for an individual patient. It's quite complex, and this is also a call, I would say, to try to, as much as possible in Europe, centralize the treatment of these kinds of diseases, and that we do not treat patients with hepatocellular carcinoma in very small hospitals, for example, where only a few of these modalities are available, but we try to centralize and try to bundle the experience, the expertise, really, so that the patient has access to all treatment options. And with that, I like to thank you very much for your attention, and of course, I'm welcoming any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor De Carve. You made a really good point that indeed liver cancer is really a complex disease, and when giving like treatment recommendation for liver cancer, we really need to integrate the patient and also the different factors of liver cancer.
And also the complexity of the treatment. Probably later we will be answering questions about what's the future of in liver treatment. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. De Carve.
Yeah, now we can move to our next speaker, right? Well, Dr. Tamas Beresky, a renowned expert with a diverse background in health and advocacy, but also research.
Yeah, Dr. Beresky's work is especially notable in the field of liver cancer, where his research and policy advisory roles have contributed to substantial advancements.
Yeah, Dr. Bereski's commitment to translating patient perspective into actually action will have policies changes continue to inspire and drive progress even now.
Yeah, so let's dive right in and hear from the man himself. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Tamas Beretzky. Tamas, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a real privilege and honor to be here with you. Yes, I mean that was a very kind introduction, but let me add something quite important to that. I'm also a patient at heightened risk. I live with HIV and I had hepatitis C up until 2017, 2018, I guess, when I was cured. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is the role of patients and patient communities in the liver health and liver care continuum. I think that's the right word for this. I will not be using slides because I think that I can make these points quite eloquently even without slides. So having been engaged with patient communities for about 20 years now, being a patient for 20 years and working in this space, I have been in touch with some of the communities that usually not so well heard. And what I mean by this is people who use drugs first and foremost, people living with HIV, and also sex workers and trans people. Now, you may say, with the exception of people who use drugs, that this may be niche populations, but in fact, these are the people who are most at risk. And they are the ones who should be monitored very closely and linked to care as much as possible in order to facilitate early detection, prevention, early detection, and then linkage to liver health care. Preferably before liver cancer occurs, but also working with these communities can contribute to making sure that you disseminate the right information to the right people, to the people who actually need this information. So there have been a number of very interesting projects, community-led, community-based projects that target these particular populations and try to bring across these messages, first and foremost by facilitating and increasing outreach and testing and then linkage to care. So I don't know to what extent you are aware of this, but there's, for example, a very interesting project called CORE, which is funded by the European Union. It's part of the EU for Health program, where community-based and community-led organizations undergo a complex capacity building and also funding a process in order to allow them to purchase more tests and to solidify their testing methodologies and structures to reach more people who need to be reached. First and foremost, people who use drugs, migrant communities, which has become extremely important in the European Union over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, especially, but also sex workers and trans people. And people who live with HIV, but those communities are traditionally quite strong, and the flow of information in this community has been very, very good and robust. So these organizations then can do outreach work, street work even, test over the last 18 months or 20 months since this project has been running. They have been able to roll out thousands of additional tests on top of what they have been doing. So HIV tests, but also hepatitis C and B testing, and a lot of linkage to care. So they actually take these people and take them to the clinic and link them up with healthcare systems which can be tremendously impactful, especially in case of people who are traditionally not so well linked to healthcare systems in the different host countries where they arrive, if they are migrants, or in the countries where they live, if they are residents of those particular countries. So I want to emphasize here that yes, there has been a lot of progress in the treatment of liver cancer, in diagnosis and in early detection. And also, as Dr. H says, there has been an incredible development in technology and in the use of new methods, but none of this works unless we do this together with the patient communities and with the communities of people most at risk or affected by the risk of liver cancer and the reasons that lead to or may lead to liver cancer. And working together also means that we acknowledge the sheer amount of knowledge and experience and skills that have been accumulated in patient communities. And here, I think it's self-explanatory if I refer to the work of DICE, but also of other patient organizations or patient-led organizations such as ELPA and others, who have done an incredible amount of work and internal capacity building and learning, and first and foremost, tremendous steps towards evidence-based advocacy by generating, collecting, generating, deploying, organizing evidence, anecdotes into evidence, and working on making sure that this evidence that's patient-led and patient community based is acknowledged and properly documented. And so if we all do this together, so if we can work together, patient communities, but also regulators, academia, and obviously the pharmaceutical industry, clinicians, so key opinion leaders, but also other clinicians, if we can establish and maintain these robust connections across these communities, that's when we will become impactful. And this has been happening in many other disease areas as well. And I can see a huge amount of development in liver health as well. And we must keep going. And this is actually what I want to, if you want to hear a call to action from me, then that's my call to action. Let's work together more. Let's join our forces, because that's how we can prevent liver cancer from happening, by diagnosing and linking people to care who need it the most. And with that, I would like to conclude, and then I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and comments, and I'm happy to reflect on them from the patient perspective.
Great presentation, Dr. Beretsky.
Yeah, Ruel, what do you think we stood out?
I think the part of cooperation over competition for success.
Yeah, no, sure. And on Dr. Beretsky's words, like we really need to stop competing and start cooperating together. Collaboration is key among like patient organization and organization as a whole.
Yeah. And how about patient organizations?
Yes, they have a valuable knowledge, and we need, we need to really actively join to collect, organize, and use this knowledge, collaborate as like a whole.
Yeah. So pool our resources and expertise.
Yeah, exactly. Shared knowledge is key, is the power. Let's make it happen.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, and let's move to our next speaker, another incredible speaker of today, that is Dr. Manon Aller, and she's a leading mind at La Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris.
Yeah, Dr. Aller is a powerhouse in the field of HCC, focusing on portal hypertension and systemic therapy. She earned her hepatology, gastroenterology, and medical oncology degrees in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. And she doesn't stop there. She manages the Department of Primary Liver Tumor and spreads groundbreaking clinical and transitional trials. Plus, she's also part of the top research team and the center, the research, the Cordelier.
Yeah. Her teams work on immune biomarkers, and the impact of portal hypertension on HCC management is truly pioneering.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and also we are thrilled really to have her share her insight with us today. So really, let's give her a warm welcome. Welcome, Dr. Manon Allaire.
Over to you, Dr. Allaire.
Good morning, everyone. So thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. So thank you to DICE. And today I'm also representative ILCA, the International Liver Cancer Association, because I'm a part of the advocacy committee in ILCA. And so today I'm happy to speak about the cause of liver cancer and to speak about how we could tackle this and try to discuss all together on what we could develop. So to start, I think it's important to speak about a bit of epidemiology because, well, we discussed quite a lot already this morning, but we know which are the causes of liver disease. For example, viral hepatitis, also metabolic syndrome or chronic alcohol intake. And what is interesting to notice too is that according to the region in the world you are living, well, you will see that the cause of the liver cancer will differ in terms of frequency. For example, if you are in Asia or in Africa, we know that the most common cause of HCC, for example, are viral hepatitis. Whereas in US and in Europe, we are speaking more and more about metabolic and alcoholic related HCC. So these are interesting. And at the end, we can say that we all know these things. We all know which causes can lead to cirrhosis and to liver cancer. So this should help us to raise awareness, education, and also, as we already discussed with Dr. Reg, how to diagnose all and provide adapted surveillance to our patient. And all this notion we're also discussing this document that we provided 2 years ago with the International Liver Cancer Association and with the advocacy committee. We wanted to provide a simple document dedicated to HCC and dedicated also to health authorities in order to raise some question and to think about programs we could help to improve the outcome of our HCC patient. And so in this document, we try to discuss about different sections and with a section dedicated to prevention. And for all this work, we decided to also compare and to think about what could be done according to the economic research of each countries. And so we divided our document considering 3 different regions, so the low, medium, and high resource according to the means which were available in each country, because as also was discussed by Dr. Reg, this is also important. We have to take into account what we have, what we can afford to our patient in order to adapt our strategies. And so if we start with hepatitis B, which is one of the main causes of liver cancer worldwide, was we have to know that for this, prevention could be quite simple because we have the vaccination. And we have a lot of work now showing that if you provide vaccination to the population, you will have a decrease in HCC incidence. So this could be quite simple. And now we are more and more thinking also to provide neonatal HBV vaccination. Also, we could think about maybe testing a population once in their life in order to identify if this patient have hepatitis B. Why? Because also we have now a treatment, and these treatments are not so expensive and are available in a lot of countries. So regarding hepatitis B, I think that indeed we could provide something with vaccination, with screening, and also with treatment, and this could be applied in all the different economic regions. For hepatitis C, here maybe things are a bit complicated. We all know that hepatitis C also is a frequent cause of liver cancer. We also know that we have a treatment, a really effective treatment, but for the moment it's still a bit expensive. So for sure, it's maybe a bit more complicated to provide universal screening in order to treat all the patients. But what we can see, and this was also just discussed by Dr. Beresky, is that you have some programs, especially in Europe, in France, for example, where now we have some help by the government to provide screening once in a life, and also to provide screening in high-risk individuals, and also to have specific program for a specific population. So this also can be done with after the idea to provide treatment for them, like test and treat programs. And this indeed are developing in mostly high-resource countries, but we could think also about program we could be rich in low and medium resource regions. What about metabolic syndrome? Because this also is something we are more and more discussing about. By metabolic syndrome, we mean obesity, but also diabetes. And what we see that finally all this metabolic syndrome, obesity, well, all this is increasing in all the region of the world. So also this is something we have to have into mind and to try to work on this. And here also, we are starting to see some initiative for government, for example, regarding obesity and in order to prevent overweight. So what do we have? In some region, in some countries, the government provide taxes on sugar beverage or fat food, for example. Also, what we are seeing more and more, it's like labeling on the food products with like the amount of calories, and I will show you after some pictures, but you can have some simple like labeling saying that if this food is good or if the food is not so good for your health. So these are small things. But also we have to educate our population to reduce sedentary activity and to provide physical activity. And this also was discussed before. So all these are small things, but we should continue to educate and to help the government to provide initiative for all this. And one thing that I think also really important is finally we have to target children for all this, especially for obesity and food. And here also we are already seeing some process at school, for example, with some specific nutrition kitchen courses. So this is also interesting to adapt also the food that we can provide also at school to encourage physical activity. So this, I think, children is an important population, and we should also think about programs to target them in order to prevent metabolic syndrome, obesity, and the sedentary health style that we are having right now. And what about programs? So for the moment, if once again we consider worldwide the different region, well, this program has started to be developed mostly in high-resource regions, but for the moment we have to educate and maybe to develop more such kind of things in low and medium resource region, because they also are facing this increase in obesity. And then I will finish with alcohol, because this also it's a main cause of liver cancer, well, especially, for example, in France. And we also know that alcohol consumption is increasing, and this not only in Europe, but also worldwide. And here also you have some strategy which have been developed and can be also discussed by authorities, such as taxing, but also for example, providing educational programs, but also maybe we could think about raise the legal age to buy alcohol. alcohol, which is the case in US, where it's later than in France, for example, and also maybe to increase the price of alcohol, or to provide once again like a strategy, like program, like a cartoon or picture like it is showing there. So we are seeing more and more this kind of thing, more and more education, but for the moment it's still unfortunately in high resource regions. So we could think also about providing such kind of information education also in low and medium resource regions. So finally, to conclude this talk, I would say that we know which things can lead to liver cancer. It is well known. Vaccination for hepatitis B is really a key, and we have to think about developing this more and more in whole our region. That for sure we need to screen and to treat viral hepatitis C, but here again we have to think about the price for the moment of the treatment. So this also we have to maybe think about discussing with industries and also with government in order to provide this treatment more affordable for the population, like it is for hepatitis B. For sure, we need to educate the population regarding the lifestyle, the food we are taking, alcohol consumption, and to provide education on the importance of physical activity. And as it was already also discussed by all of you, we do have to work all together in order to raise awareness about all these and to educate the authorities in order also that they can provide documents, they can educate the population, and they can support all of us in order to decrease liver disease and for sure liver cancer incidence. So thanks a lot for the invitation, and I will be happy to take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Aller. I think, yeah, really the main point is also indeed public awareness campaign, and I think here really diocese is playing this part not well, like with all the campaign we are doing, especially during Liver Cancer Awareness Month. We are also having our own campaign about raising awareness both about the importance of screening, but also especially the importance of prevention.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, you always have Step app. If you haven't downloaded it, download it, because it would measure your steps and motivate you to walk to prevent digestive cancers in general. So,
yeah. So now we can move with our last speaker today, which is our colleague Liliana Kuchnerite, medical and scientific project coordinator at DICE.
She will present the key findings from DICE's HCC prevention and diagnosis mapping project.
Yeah, the floor is yours, Lily.
Thank you. So I think my talk will tie nicely into the previous ones. First of all, I will be telling you a bit about, as Ruel and Luca just said, about the research project we conducted this year, where we mainly focused on hepatocellular carcinoma, which is the most common form of liver cancer. Approximately 90% of liver cancer cases are HCCs. And this kind of liver cancer, as we already heard now, is often preventable. And when it is diagnosed early, there are several treatments available to patients which are associated with long-term survival. Sadly, despite these facts, the incidence and mortality of liver cancer in general, but also of HCC, continues to increase. And we believe that a better understanding of the current situation in HCC prevention and diagnosis can help with aiding the development of targeted efforts that can reduce the impact of HCC. So with this in mind, this year, DICE mapped the landscape of HCC prevention and diagnosis within Europe. So for this, we created an online survey that was made up of 37 questions. And this survey was distributed among clinicians, patient organizations, and public health experts in roughly a 5-month period. And overall, we had 222 participants from 20 EU member states and also 2 additional European countries. And on my slides, you can find the link to the executive summary, which we produced based on the results, and as well as the link to the interactive map, which we created, where each country that participated is clickable, and then you get the summary of the data for that country. And I would strongly encourage you to check these resources out because they are very interesting and informative. And also on my following slides, you will see a bit of the highlights from our data. I will not talk you through all of it in much detail, so I would also encourage you to come back to the slides if you're interested in this. So first of all, the first angle we looked at was prevention efforts. And within this, as you just heard from Dr. Allaire, there are different aspects to look at. So for hepatitis B, as we know, there is a vaccine available. And the European Council for Vaccine Preventable Cancers has just set recommendations recently, and by 23 there is a list of goals that should have been reached. And in our research we found that very many countries out of the participating countries did not reach these goals. So this is something where there is still room for improvement. And also we found that in roughly half of the countries is there official organized efforts to vaccinate affected adult populations against HPV. And as we heard already in the previous talks, this would be very important to increase. And also only half of the participating countries have awareness programs regarding the benefits of HPV vaccination. And same, the other angle that we also heard about now previously is, of course, non-viral causes for liver cancer. For example, metabolic disease. And only a little over half of the countries we found had official organized efforts to prevent people from developing metabolic disease. And approximately 18 indicated that they have official organized efforts to control the accessibility of alcohol and the popularity of alcohol consumption. And as we know, also alcohol-related liver disease can be an underlying cause for HCC. And furthermore, the other important aspects we looked at were the awareness of the general population as well as at-risk populations and primary care physicians about liver disease and liver cancer. And although we found that almost all of these countries had awareness campaigns about liver disease, hepatitis, liver cancer, and several other similar programs, the awareness level of the general public of the risk factors and signs and symptoms of HCC was rather poor on average, and the awareness level of primary care physicians was also poor to maximum moderate. And this might, to a degree, explain many of the other issues we are seeing, for example, late diagnosis and stigma, because and the lack of prevention, because if people aren't aware of the disease, they of course cannot act on it. And that is very important that we raise awareness. So in line with this, we also found that half of the participating countries, at least our participants, perceived that there is stigma associated with hepatitis infection, and the numbers for other forms of liver disease and for HCC appear to be a bit lower, but still alarmingly high. And as we know, stigma is a huge hurdle in the way of effective healthcare, and it is also something that very negatively impacts the quality of life of patients. So this is something we have to work together to tackle. And we also found that in about 15 of the participating countries was surveillance every 6 months in patients with liver cirrhosis implemented, despite this being the main recommendation of all major clinical guidelines. So this is something that also calls for improvement. And probably or quite likely related to this, we also saw that in half of the participating countries, HCC is diagnosed at advanced or end stage, which is very late diagnosis. So these patients look at a very poor prognosis, and this is definitely something that we need to work to improve. So overall, our results draw attention to several shortcomings that we need to address, and also inequalities between European countries. And I again invite you to have a closer look at our results, both the map and the summary that we published. And overall, I would like to now return to the title of the webinar. It is never too early to act. And we decided to call our webinar by this name because we are seeing that there is a need for more coordinated, both primary and secondary prevention efforts across Europe and globally as well. And we are quite certain that the lack of public awareness about liver cancer is one of the key underlying issues that is in the way of effective liver cancer prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. And this is linking back to also last year's research project, the Liver Cancer Index, where we looked at the treatment availability across Europe. So I would also recommend that you have a look at that. These can all be found on the DICE website. And finally, we believe at DICE that advocacy on the national level is a key ingredient to us achieving the necessary goals in the field and tackling the burden of liver cancer. And so is, as Tamás said, collaboration in the field. That is very important.
Thank you so much, Lily. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, or we're already run out of time. We promise a Q&A, but we will gather all the questions and make sure that it will be answered by our experts. So don't hesitate to type on your questions if there are burning questions, of course.
Yeah, so now we can, I think, wrap up. This has been like a great discussion today, very enlightening webinar. Norwell.
Indeed, Luca. A massive thank you to all our speakers for their insight. DICE firmly believes that unwavering advocacy and collaboration among stakeholders can tackle liver cancer and improve patient quality of life. We have distance to cover, but the path is clear.
Yeah, elevating liver cancer on the policymakers' agenda, raising public awareness, it's like vital for better prevention and diagnosis.
Yeah, and let's not forget our attendees. Your presence and engagement highlights your dedication to ensure no patient is left behind and everyone receives the care they deserve.
Yeah, and DICE has a focus on fostering collaboration to address like the barrier faced by liver cancer patients. So today's event is really like another key step to hopefully sparking a new beneficial initiative.
Yeah, the key takeaway is that liver cancer advocacy shouldn't be confined specific events or months. It's a growing global burden that requires daily attention.
Yeah, exactly. Well said, well, and thank you all for joining us. And we're looking forward to really driving this mission forward. And we look forward to see you at other future events such as Entero.
Yes.
Right, Will?
Yeah, Entero is happening November 14 to 15. And you will see the link to register and join us virtually. So that's happening, and please register. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you. Ciao.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.